created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Oh, yes, 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 you read the name of today's program well. We're really talking about the Donizzetian Zarzuela called Marina. It's been a good number of programs since the last time we talked about a zarzuela, so I also think it is a good time to recap on a couple of things around the Spanish genre called the zarzuela, and of course we are also going to be talking about why I say this is a Donizzetian zarzuela. All of that we are going to be talking about in today's Parlons de Donizzetian zarzuela Marina. Of course, I would like to invite you again to write us an email at operawillofsinging@gmail.com, operawillofsinging@gmail.com. Please send us a comment, how you feel about the music, what topic you would like to suggest for this series. In fact, I wanted to tell you, well, there is something that maybe I need to explain. Well, if you're a frequent listener of podcasts, you know it already that there is a number of people who follow the programs in order, which means they already started from program number one and they keep going and going and going until they reach the latest. And that is the reason why any announcement that I make today can easily be heard in 3, 4, or maybe in 8 months, depending on at what time people advance in listening to these programs. Also, we need to keep in mind that sometimes some of those listeners only listen to those whose names seem attractive to them. I can testify that because out of the people who listen to the latest programs in order, I notice when there is a title that is not particularly attractive to you and happens to have less listeners. So what all of this is going to is that I am giving this announcement today, but it might not be heard by most of the listeners soon, or maybe they will listen once a decision is already made. But what I wanted to tell you is that this first cycle of the Parlons de, where we have talked about not about the most frequent operas on stage, but let's say on the second ones, it will soon come to an ending, this cycle, because I think it is a good time to start a short cycle. And I would like to ask you if you don't mind sending an email with your opinion on whether you would like to have a cycle on the composers. Maybe we can make a short cycle of maybe 6 or 10 opera composers. Of course, Verdi, Donizetti, Bellini, Gounod, Bizet, Mozart, most certainly Wagner. So Leoncavallo. We can have a small cycle around the most famous or the most important opera composers, more on their biography, their compositions, their style, or we can have a cycle on from my perspective at least, because I can ask you, but if I ask you, we will never end. But at least, or maybe you can, of course, you can always suggest, maybe we can build a cycle around the most important singers of the last 100 years, I would say. Yeah, because Enrico Caruso will still fit in that countdown. So maybe we can have a selection of also 8, maybe 12 max most important singers of the past 100 years. Of course, that would be open to tenors, sopranos, mezzos, counter tenors, baritones, basses. But now that I am thinking of the number of tesituras, maybe 10 or 12 programs could be too few. Let's give a little thought around that, but that wouldn't be a very long, because that also implies that a given singer will be left out. So maybe if we make a cycle of the top sopranos and we only include Tebaldi, Callas, and Caballé, people who love Sutherland will not be very happy about my decision. And if I make the top 3 for the tenors and I only include Del Monaco, Corelli, and maybe Di Stefano, people who love Bergonzi I would still expect people to complain, why did I include Di Stefano, not Bergonzi? So I think that might be contentious. So give me your thoughts on whether you would like to have a cycle on opera composers, or maybe the most important singers of the past century. Right after that cycle, we could go back to this Parlons deux, and this time the Parlons deux cycle would be on the most popular operas. So that's what is coming for the remaining, not only of the 2023, but also for 2024. We are already in September, or at least this program is being recorded in September. Most likely will be transmitted in October, because the programs for September I already programmed them. So this will be for October. But enough with the talk. Insist, send your comments to operawheelofsinging at gmail.com, operawheelofsinging at gmail.com. Please remember that if you want a response to you to be provided through this podcast, to inform it in your email. Or if you just want a private response to your communication, just let me know. By default, all the responses to your emails are personal to the email you sent us. I also wanted to offer you an explanation. My voice is in worse conditions than ever, and most likely it will continue to be like that for now, an unknown number of months. I am undergoing a medical treatment that is putting my throat in very bad conditions. So I will not say that I can barely speak, but I have lots of emission problems. My throat is sore for most of the week. So you know that I like to share with you parts of the melody or parts of the arias, so that you can identify when you are actually listening to a complete rendition or recording of the programs. So my apologies in advance for that, but that is totally out of my control. I hope that the following 2 years my throat at some point, or my body will get used to the medical treatment, and things will not be like this for the coming 23 months, 24 months. So hope this will improve. That is the explanation of why I sound a little different and worse than ever. Okay, so Zarzuela. Zarzuela is the Spanish genre that, for the sake of simplicity, and I don't like this level of simplicity, it is said to be the Spanish proposal, the Spanish equivalent of the opera, the same way the opera would be the Italian opera to the Italians, the German opera to the Germans. So the Spanish thought they wanted to have their own gender, and this is what is called the zarzuela. Given that this is a very local gender, it has characteristics that make sense to people who are Spanish, who are familiar with the culture, with the way of speaking, with the way people behave, because it is thought to be a gender for the Spanish. Of course, to be sung and to be known for the rest of the world, but it is thought to display natural characteristics of the Spanish culture, of the people of Spain. With that in mind, the zarzuela is usually seen as a secondary gender, a second-class level gender that has to do, from my perspective, more with our exquisitedeness in the sense of opera. We like to think it needs to have the aria for the prima donna, and it needs to have an aria for the baritone, and of course a very demanding aria for the tenor, so that we can actually call it an opera with a minimal duration of this, with a minimal number of acts like that, with a minimal complexity of this, and with an instrumentation like that. When we picture all of that in our minds, then we can say it is an opera, it is a grande opéra, as we like to say. But since this gender coming from Spain does not always, or most of the times, does not match these preconceptions, then we say, oh no, zarzuela is a second class, second level of musical composition, and that is why many singers do not like to address this gender. I think it is very unfair because I have already explained that it was born as the natural proposal of Spain for the world, but mainly for the own people of Spain. So, trying to compare or using standards coming from a country like Italy or France to compare it to what is the production of the zarzuelas, it's biased from the beginning. I would kindly suggest that we stop making those comparisons. Is an opera by Massenet less opera than one of Wagner is simply childish. We shouldn't be comparing that. We are talking about two very different composers that come from that have very different styles that address naturally in different languages. And why should we be comparing if Manon, for instance, is better or is worse than the cycle of the Nibelung? It's simply not fair. It's incredible that in this 21st century we are still discussing things just to prove that we are more cultivated than anyone else. Seeking this comparison for the sole purpose of proving our own point is just, from my perspective, a waste of time. I do not want to fall in the discussion of whether the Zarzuela is more valuable than the operas of Donizetti or Bellini for one or other reason. They obey to very different backgrounds and they belong to very different cultures and a very specific given environment where they were created. Okay, so after those initial thoughts around what the zarzuela actually is, we need to talk about today's Donizzetian zarzuela called Marina. What is Marina? Marina is the name of the main character, the same way Aida is the name of the main character, as in Verdi's opera, the same way as Tosca is the name in the Puccinian opera. Marina is the name of the main character in the zarzuela of the same name, Marina. So, the name of a woman. She's a young woman, she's an orphan, and first things first, why do I keep calling it a Donizzetian zarzuela? Maestro Emilio Arrieta, the composer, it is known that he studied in Italy, he made studies in Italy, and he liked the style of the Italian opera. He was asked to write a zarzuela, but he thought that in order to make it in the style of the grand opera, or at least the most well-known Italian opera, he thought it was a good idea to somehow mimic or make it similar to that style. And he felt comfortable writing pretty much in the style of Donizetti. If you have the opportunity of watching the complete recording of Marina, you will notice that at some points we feel like we are listening, and moreover, we are listening Lucia di Lammermoor. This Marina composition, in the way it is written, structured, built, resembles a lot to Lucia di Lammermoor. And in the same way in Lucia, the main character is Lucia, and the first soloist singer that opens the opera is Lucia herself, in Lucia di Lammermoor. Same way here, the first singer singing her solo is Marina. Marina starts with a very well-known aria or romanza, because remember, romanza is the right name in the zarzuela, called Pensar en él. It is sort of thinking of him. So in her introductory aria, Pensar en él, very well known, as I was telling you, the most important Spanish sopranos have sung it. You'd like to name Pilar Lorengar, who built most of her career in Austria, and of course the very great Montserrat Caballé loved to sing Pensar en él in their recitals and concerts. And the same way as Reñaban el Silencio by Lucia is not an easy aria, same way Pensar en él is not an easy aria. Same way in Lucia di Lammermoor it is a soprano, more likely leggera, with good coloratura. Same way Marina is a soprano, more likely to be leggera, with a very firm chest, and central notes, with easiness to the highest notes, and with a very bright coloratura. I'm not exactly saying that the soprano who sings Lucia can actually sing Marina, no, at least not exactly, but their tesituras are very similar. And so our Lucia, now called Marina, starts singing her Pensar en él, esa es mi vida, mi solo bien. Ta-ra-ra, ra-ra-ra, ta-ra-ra-ri-ra, ta-ra-ra, ra-ra-ra, la-ra-la-la-la. If you think a little of Reñaban el Silencio, you find a similarity where she says Reñaban el Silencio, ta la la lo re lo, ta la 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 lo la, as in Lucia or So our Donizzetian Zarzuela, Marina continues, sin su amor amarle fiel, dejar deshojar de la flor delicada, y si ella mi anhelo respuesta no da, de Laura en el giro mandarle un suspiro, que si él no lo acoge, que al cielo se va. In this very beautiful aria, or romanza, I would like maybe here tell you that, in fact, the original composition of Marina as a zarzuela was asked to be slightly modified by the very famous tenor Enrico Tamberlik. Enrico Tamberlik was one of the first singers of Marina. He asked this to be changed into a more operatic format, so there is a version in 3 acts that is even more operatic. And I mention it because I was telling you this looks like Lucia. And so after her main part of the aria where she's singing, oh, I think of him, that's all I devote my life to. I think of him and I want to be loyal to him, because if I am not with his love, I don't know what happened if I don't have his love. De Laura en el giro mandarle un suspiro, que si él no lo acoge al cielo se va. If you're not a native speaker of Spanish, you may not have noticed, but this is very, very nicely written into Spanish. Believe me, that's my native language. De Laura en el giro mandarle un suspiro, que si él no lo acoge al cielo se va. You may have noticed how easily, how naturally the text of this zarzuela flows into the spoken Spanish. Ah, pensar en él, esa es mi vida, mi solo bien, pensar en él. Amarle fiel, si soy querida, y aún sin su amor, amar mi vida, mi solo bien. Pensar en él. Then comes a small repetition. Mi solo bien, pensar en él. Mi solo bien, pensar en él. Then a cadenza. Mi solo bien. And then the soprano may choose how to wrap up the aria. So it is very much on the taste of the soprano or what she can actually sing. But think of this part as the reñaba en el silencio, as I was telling you. Reñaba en el silencio. And you know that after the reñaba en el silencio, there is a small intermission by the lady. I forgot the word in English. Limosa. I will look for that word. Tanto narravi nel turbamento, ma piega l'alma, io temo invano t'ovvio, ma tristo presento, rimento risveglia quest'uomo arcano. Tenta uniarlo. In this case, it is not a feminine voice that interrupts and matches with Marina's, but it is a male voice, and she will continue the same way Lucia has a cabaletta for the Reñaba nel Silencio. We will also have a small cabaletta, sort of a cavatina for Marina, where she will show us with her ornaments, with pyrotechnics, with trines, with scales, and with a beautiful high note to wrap up her presentation. If you notice, very similar construction to Lucia di Lammermoor, where we have similar tesituras, similar colors, similar pyrotechnics, starting with an aria, a very tranquil aria, Reñaba nel Silencio, this case Pensar en él, intermission by another character, female in the case of Lucia, male in the case of Marina, and then a cabaletta or a cavatina to wrap up with fireworks. Basically the same. That's what Maestro Arrieta built for the first role. But now comes an aria that I would say it's at least in the beginning, it's a little less Donizzetian, but reminds me more of Otello. You remember Otello that starts and opens with Esultate l'orgoglio musulman. I think everybody remembers that because it is very attractive in the entrance of the tenor. But it is similar because Verdi was too demanding with Otello because he's still cold. Even though singers, of course, do vocalizations and warm up their throats, they still haven't sung on stage. And Maestro Verdi thought, why not making the tenor open up with that and the same way Maestro Arrieta gave to the tenor his presentation aria, same way as Marina had hers, give him his presentation aria opening with Costa la de Levante, playa la de Lloret, dichosos los ojos que os vuelvo a ver. And when he opens, Costa la de Levante, the tenor, same way as in Otello, is just arriving on stage. He's opening his participation with that. And at this point, I would also like to mention that if you have the chance of watching on YouTube, because it is on YouTube, if you have the chance of watching the recording of this Donizzetian Zarzuela by the very great Maestro Kraus, along with the splendid soprano Ana Maria Gonzalez, this recording is just, from my perspective, perfection. We have the Spanish tenor Alfredo Kraus, master of the vocal technique, with an easiness to the high notes. Of course, Maestro Kraus was a master in singing Donizetti, now singing something written in the style of Donizetti, but in his own language. Maestro Krauss is just perfection in this role. Believe me, believe me, believe me, if you have the chance, go and look for that recording. I think it was 1987, 1988. Look for that. Ana Maria Gonzalez and Maestro Alfredo Krauss, Zarzuela Marina. And have around 2 hours of splendid music and splendid vocal technique and great voices. Ana Maria Gonzalez, I had the chance of attending a concert by Ana Maria Gonzalez in the 90s. I was very young back then. I was so captivated by her voice. Ana Maria had a voice of such beauty, beautiful harmonics, beautiful color, homogeneous, bright, solid high notes. Wow. She's been one of the best sopranos I have ever heard. And here with Maestro Krauss, well, what can I say? So, in his entrance, after his Resonatate, which in this case is Costa del Levante, playa la lloret, dichosos los ojos que has vuelvo a ver. And maybe I would like, or I need to mention also that there are not so many singers, not so many tenors that like to go for this zarzuela because it is not easy to sing. It is many things, but it is not easy. It really demands a great tenor, a great soprano, and an excellent baritone. If you don't have the right soprano, Marina will just not work. If you have a weak tenor, Marina will not work. And that is the reason why it is not represented that often in the stages. So after his opening of Costa de Levante, he will also have the support of the choir. El cielo esta orilla trajo con bien de amigos. The participation of the chorus in this zarzuela is very important because that's, from my perspective, what gives more Spanish color to the zarzuela. So the name of the tenor is Jorge. He continues, ¿no es verdad que con la ausencia del amor, si en el alma vive oculto, con la ausencia crece más, con la ausencia crece más, es un fuego que no mengua a la distancia más remota, que al mar azota sin matar la luz jamás, sin matar su luz jamás, sin matar su luz jamás, sin matar su luz jamás. And of course, Maestro Krauss, with those very easy high notes that he could sing, he liked to transpolate, to sing a higher note than written to make it more spectacular, which of course he achieves to perfection. Sin matar solos jamás. He would not sing jamás, but he could sing sin matar solos jamás. Still reminding me more of Otello or more of Radamés in Aida rather than a Spanish singer singing zarzuela. Pascual, amigos míos, María, Marina, ¿dónde está? Pascual would reply, por tu feliz arribo al templo se fue a orar. Va, vuelve, Jorge, mírala, corriendo viene acá. ¿Rogaste por tu hermano? Asks Jorge. Lágrimas quizás, las iras se aplacaron del férvido huracán. That's what he starts asking Marina, who is returning. He calls her sister, even though they're not really, at least not from blood. Marina is an orphan, so she was raised in the family of Jorge, and that is the reason why He called her sister. They are brothers, even though they are not brothers in blood. Keep that in mind because I am going to tell you in a second why. So, a second part, after his Esultate, after his Costa la de Levante, he will sing a more, not I wouldn't call it a cabaletta, but a more, a brighter part of his intervention. Al ver en la inmensa llanura del mar, al ver en la inmensa llanura del mar, las aves marinas corren hacia acá, siguiendo envidioso su vuelo fugaz, suspiros del alma van escapando hacia acá. Marina will reply, porque si no siente ni una pena, in mal oír el palpitar de afán. And Jorge would reply with the same strophe and with the intervention of the male chord. La playa nativa lograste alcanzar y en ella espera amor y amistad, amor y amistad, amor y amistad. Al ver en la inmensa llanura del mar, las aves marinas con rumbo hacia acá, siguiendo envidioso su vuelo fugaz, suspiros del alma, mandaba a mi hogar. I have already exaggerated, at least in the length. Remember that I will not be in good vocal conditions for a couple of years. That's what Maestro Krauss does. The composition is already difficult, and what he does in that recording is that he makes it even more difficult, of course, making use of his easiness for the high notes and the great reading technique that he had. So, palpita, palpita de afán, which makes or that resembles a lot more like an aria for an heroic tenor rather than just a zarzuela. So Maestro Arrieta really aimed very high when he built this. Of course, provided that this is more in the style of the Italian and Donizetti, many people say that this zarzuela is not worth to be seen because it goes against the own principles of what a zarzuela should be. I have already explained that when we go to that level of criticism, we lose too many opportunities of enjoying great music. And I was also telling you that Marina and Jorge are not brothers, in fact, at least not in blood. And Pascual wanted to marry Marina. Marina told him to ask for her hand to Jorge, being his older brother. So Pascual has already asked for the hand of Marina to Jorge. Jorge has accepted, but with a broken heart, because in the bottom of his heart, he loves Marina and not as his sister. He loves her, he wants her to marry him. But now that Pascual is interested in marrying Marina, he has accepted, and Jorge is heartbroken. And the act, as one would expect in an opera, let me compare once again, how does Lucia di Lammermoor wrap up the first act? With a duet between Lucia. Of course, if you remember, Lucia has a duet with his very much loved Edgardo de Ravenswood. In this, we are going to have Marina and Jorge wrapping up with a duet somehow in a similar way as it would be in Lucia by Donizetti. If you remember, the duet in the Lucia is Verrà te sola ore, ta da ta ta, and at the end, the two of them will go for high notes. Io parto, addio, da 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 da, and then they would wrap up sometimes with a high C. And in this opera, in this Zarzuela Marina, both Jorge and Marina will go also for a duet where they will go high into high notes and wrap up also with a combination of their voices for that high note. Another similarity in the construction between Donizettis. We have already had 4 similarities: aria and cabaletta by Lucia, same for Marina. Then we will have, with the intervention of a female voice in the case of Donizetti, a male voice in the case of Marina. Then we have the introduction or presentation aria high in the style of Donizetti because it's very for a high tenor, and then the duet wrapping up Lucia the same way it wraps up in Marina. Now, what happens in the following act? Then we have a very, very lovely scene, or at least I love it very much. You remember that in Lucia di Lammermoor, there will be, of course, skipping the duet between Lucia and her brother. There is a scene of the wedding scene, in fact, in Lucia. Well, there will be also a preparation for the marriage between Pascual and Marina. Of course, Jorge is not very happy about it, as I told you before. And we will have a drinking scene, because not only Traviata can have a drinking scene, we will, and not only Cavalleria Rusticana can have a drinking scene. Zarzuela also has a brindisi, written by Maestro Arrieta, of course, that is called a beber, ahogar, el grito del dolor, que el vino hará olvidar las penas del amor. And the choir will reply, a beber, a porar la copa de licor, que el vino hará aumentar los goces del amor, que el vino hará aumentar los goces del amor, que el vino hará aumentar los goces del amor. That's what the choir will sing. If you notice, the melody is very sticky. Ta 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 da da 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 ta 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 da. This drinking scene or this drinking song will continue where Jorge repeating the same melody. A beber, ahogar, el grito del dolor, que el vino hará olvidar las penas del amor. And then we will have again the choir, a beber, a porar la copa de licor. Ta la 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 la. At the end, all the voices will mix together to sing the same melody. El vino a olvidar las penas del amor. El vino a olvidar las penas del amor. El vino a olvidar las penas del amor. El vino a olvidar las penas. Of course, depending on the capacities of the tenor, we'll wrap up with a high note. Del amor, or more of the taste of the singer. This scene I particularly love, not only because of the voice of the tenor is very, very bright and lovely, but also because of the mix that Maestro Arrieta achieves in the male choir that accompanies with that tan tan tarararan tan tan tarararan tan tan tarararan tan tan tarararan. But now comes another number that I would like to share with you and confess at the same time that this is the first number that I ever heard when I was very young, and from the Zarzuela Marina. This is in fact a trio The trio is usually given the name of No Puede Ser. And I remember when I was a very, very, very young and I wanted to study singing. Of course, the first recording that I heard was in the voice of Maestro Kraus, and I told myself, how is it even possible that a male voice, can even do that? If you have the chance of go and look for it. The trio No Puede Ser from Zarzuela Marina with Maestro Kraus, and just see what he can do. Imagine what it would be for a very, very young guy, like I was before, like I was back then. What is it like that for a young man who would like to learn singing to listen to such a great voice and what he did in that trio? He again goes higher in some notes, goes longer in some notes, basically because he can, but he does it in very good taste. It does not feel unnatural. Maestro Kraus, of course, learning the style of Maestro Arrieta and understanding music very well, he did it with very good taste. And this trio opens with the voice of the tenor, Jorge. No puede ser, no puede ser. Here, even though they are separated by a pause, by a silence, Maestro Kraus liked to link the two notes together because it is written No puede ser en las alas. Maestro Kraus would do something like No puede ser, no puede ser las alas del deseo, mi ilusión la ve flotar, la dibuja el cabrilleo de la lona sobre el mar, de la lona sobre el mar. Believe me, if you have the chance of listening to this introductory part of the trio with Maestro Kraus, you will not notice how much perfection and understanding of the style and the use of his voice he does in here. But after that phrase, it continues with the voice of Marina, who replies to him, Me desgarra el alma entera. And Jorge will continue, Yo percibo donde quiera de sus pasos el rumor y en mi extraña borrachera yo la siento, yo la siento en derredor. And Marina would reply in return that her soul is turned into pieces by love. Me desgarra el alma entera el quejido de su amor. And Roque would reply, the baritone voice, El amor es el que quiera que yo estoy por el licor. Because Roque is just getting drunk, and that's why his intervention is anybody can fool about anybody because I'm just in love for alcohol. Going back to the participation of Jorge, the tenor, en las alas del deseo, mi ilusión la ve flotar, la dibuja el cabrilleo de la luna sobre el mar, de la luna sobre el mar. try to do is what Maestro Krauss does in this trio, because it is not written de la luna, it is written just de la luna sobre el mar. If you notice what is written, what Maestro Krauss does is just out of this world. Marina would still continue. Me desgarra el alma entera. Jorge, yo percibo donde quiera. Since it is a trio, at the same time, Roque is singing again. En amor es el que quiera que yo estoy por él y cor. De sus pasos el rumor y en mi extraña borrachera yo la siento. Yo la siento en derredor y en mi extraña borrachera yo la siento en derredor. And then the trio would wrap up with a music, almost in arbato. This is how this trio goes. The part of the baritone is not so difficult to sing. The part of the soprano is not so difficult to sing. The part of the tenor is not so difficult to sing. But if you do it like it does Maestro Krauss, you would barely find in the world a tenor capable of singing it live with such brightness. And this is about to have a happy ending. Remember that Marina will not or would be marrying another man instead of Jorge. So we are already the preparation. There's going to be wedding. We have already had the drinking scene. We already have had the complaints of the tenor in the trio. And there is going to be a scene that is the second number that I heard when I was very young. This part are the seguidillas, and these seguidillas, you may have heard the word seguidilla in Carmen. Sevilla, chez mon ami las pastia. J'irai danser la seguidilla, voir du Manzanilla. J'irai chez mon ami Lilas Bastian. Taratan, 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 taratan. These seguidillas in the wedding scene, in the wedding act, is for the middle and low voices. No enseñes en la playa la pantorrilla, que hay muchos tiburones junto a la orilla, y es una pesca que va siempre acechando la carne fresca, y es una pesca que va siempre acechando la carne fresca. And there is also another participation by the male choir. I was sharing with you earlier that the male choir in this Zarzuela is just lovely. Tan tan tarana, tarata ta tan. It is sung in staccato. Tan tan taratan tarata tan 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 tarata tan tan tarata tan tarata tan tarata tan tarata tan tarata tan tarata tan. So don't worry if you don't speak or understand Spanish, because the singing is so rhythmic and lovely that you get easily captured by the melody. Tan 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 tan. La luz abrasadora de tu pupila, me está dejando el cuerpo como una anguila, como una anguila. So the composition of this beautiful number in two male voices with the same intervention by the male choir, ta-tan, ta-ra-tan, ta-ra-ta-ta-ta-tan, gives so much light, so much brightness to this final part of the Zarzuela that I don't know how to explain it, but it really brings light to my life. And you know that a good Donizzetian opera would wrap up with a Donizzetian aria by the main soprano or by the soprano. And as such, that is what we are going to witness. There is a final aria written for Marina, the soprano, and believe it or not, please watch the recording that I have been recommending. Go and look in YouTube for Maestro Alfredo Kraus, Ana Maria Gonzalez recording of Marina, I think 1987, 1988. And you will find that, believe it or not, in your ears after her final aria of Marina, Ana Maria Gonzalez, and it is tradition that soprano is going to sing the coloratura part of Lucia di Lammermoor. If you remember that after Il dolce suono, there is a good number of coloratura part. One of the most famous cadenzas and ornaments are by Dame John Sutherland. The same way Dame John Sutherland would sing it after Il dolce suono is exactly what the soprano is going to do in Marina. The same dialogue that the female voice in Lucia has with the flute is the same dialogue that the soprano Marina is going to have in this final part. It is basically a copy-paste from Lucia di Lammermoor into Marina. If you recall that, part, you may recall that the dialogue with the flute goes like da 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 da. This dialogue that the soprano has in the Ardon Vincenzi in Lucia di Lammermoor is a copy-paste that is added to Marina at the end of the opera. So it's, for some people, it's quite disturbing that after the style of the, even though I have mentioned that maybe too many times that this is a Donizzetian Zarzuela by Maestro Arrieta, I still find it shocking that after, for instance, after the number of ta ta ra tan ta ra tan 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 ta ra ta 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 tan ta ra ta 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 tan, then we would find the cadenzas of Ardon Vincenzi wrapping up the opera. So it's somehow disturbing. I understand if people just don't get it, but it is the way it is written. The truth is that this zarzuela is made for the sole purpose of displaying the capacities of the soprano and the tenor. And if that would be the purpose, it does it to perfection. One can see the size of both singers when they happen to sing this very lovely Marina by Maestro Arrieta. Thank you very much for having joined me. Remember to send your comments, opera@gmail.com, opera@gmail.com. Thank you.